record. There we go. I'm here with Salvatore, my mentor from last semester, and he agreed to, help me with this podcast interview. Sal, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Renard, certainly great to see you again, and nice to be reconnecting. I'm an IT manager. I've been working in IT for several decades. I got my first job in IT in 1986. That was at Queens College, and I was doing academic computing. Since then, my career has moved on to financial services, where I've done lots of different things as an infrastructure engineer, a software engineer. I've worked for 5 startup ventures, large enterprises, large global insurance companies, and I've held senior positions like Chief Technology Officer too.
So Sal, this is for my MIS class. Once again, my name is Renard Harrison, if I didn't mention that before. And this is my first podcast, and my name on my podcast is Name This Podcast Later. So my first question to you, Sal, is trusting the director of IT decisions. I typically have a lot of issues with that. How can one overcome, something like that in the work environment?
So trusting a director, trusting the decisions that someone in the director of IT role might make.
Somebody like you, if you give them if you said, hey, this is the way I want to go, you tell the CEO, or you're saying, hey, listen, here's an example. Windows 11 is out. I don't think updates are going to be rampant on Windows 10 anymore. We should upgrade. And they're going to tell you, well, we can save more money by not upgrading, right? And you're going to find the next 2 to 3 years in the future, people are going to start upgrading to Windows 11. Whether Windows 11 is good or bad, because we do have those good and bad versions of Windows 11. This is something that you got to present to the CEO. You got to present it to the office, and they might reject it. So, my question is, this is something that I constantly battle in. I say something and I make sense what I say, but they typically reject it.
Right. I got it. Yeah, I got it, Renard. That situation and that circumstance, it comes up quite often. And that's a really good example that you just described with Windows 11. That's something that's current. All people in IT have to start thinking about that. We're going to have to manage through it. And we've just recently managed through it with Windows 7 on the desktop, right? In enterprise type environments. Windows 7, I think, went out of support in late 2019 or early 2020. So that's a great example. And there's lots of other things like that. In general, I would say that there's so many different factors that need to be considered when making decisions like that. And, decisions are ultimately going to support a set of recommendations that are coming from IT. You brought up an example of, with the Windows 11 upgrade, you brought up an example of finances and budgets being considered, right? The company might want to get more they might want to get a little bit more value out of their Windows 10 implementation before they decide to invest in Windows 11, in the next version of the desktop. But so there's always going to be factors like that to be considered, but there's so many, and the factors that are relevant that are going to influence whether a business is going to support big IT investment like that are going to involve things like, what are the other competing priorities at the company, right? Maybe at that moment, the company has competing priorities for expanding a business, maybe opening up a new office, maybe they have competing priorities that are competitive with someone else in the industry another company in the industry that they're operating in. Maybe they have other types of changes in the going on in the company, not related to growth. Maybe they're looking to downsize, right? And downsizing to reduce their expenses, let's say. Downsizing takes effort, and people need to be dedicated to that. So having a competing priority, and let's continue to use your example of the Windows 11 upgrade, having a competing priority where people need to be focused on Windows 11 type upgrade, right? That type of upgrade, because it's a desktop operating system, can't be done in the background because end users use the desktop operating systems. So it's going to take some amount of time from every end user who's using that platform, right? So there's often competing priorities like that need to be considered. And I think both sides of that table, the IT side and the business side of the table, need to be mindful of those competing priorities. The other thing that I think sometimes people miss, and this is not only in IT, but even on the business side, is that sometimes priorities aren't necessarily tangible. So, something like having the budget to allocate for that type of upgrade, that is a very specific, tangible thing. It could be measured, right? How much is a Windows 11 upgrade going to cost? There's going to be fixed costs like licensing costs. There's going to be variable costs that come in labor and things like that. Both of those could be estimated, but both of those can be estimated and they can be measured. But there's also a timing variable. Now, time is something that I think we sometimes miss. So a Windows 11 upgrade might not be right to start now. It's just not the right time. It might be right to start a month from now, 6 months from now, or next year, right? So we have to keep in mind that, as a company goes on, managing its priorities, moving their objectives forward, those things happen over time. And there's a time and a place, a right time and place for those priorities that have to be considered too. But it's something that has to be worked out. The IT group shouldn't feel badly about not getting the support of doing something at this moment in time. It can likely happen in the future, and the business shouldn't feel badly about IT giving feedback where it might be premature to start something right now. Right? It could be right in the future. But those are ongoing discussions, and there's always going to be pull and take, and those type of conflicts to be worked out. That's a good example of one.
Great. Great answer, Sal. Great answer. My second question is whether the company should segregate how its income is coming in. For example, right now, the company that I work for, which is GMG Transportation, don't know how their financial income is coming in from what. In the computer, it doesn't segregate. Hey, this came from soap. This came from the website. This came from a calling. Should a company look to segregate how the income is coming in the building?
Yeah, I don't think there's a clear-cut answer there. I think the quick answer is maybe. So some of the factors that I think would go into making that type of decision is, what is a rough estimate on the split of the income, right? So as an example, let's say, let's say
it's definitely gonna take reprogramming at least, right?
Yeah.
It's going to take reprogramming to do something like that. So, that's a cost that right off the top of your head,
Yeah. So let me make sure I understand your point there. It's going to take reprogramming in order to measure the split of income.
Just to do the split, just to do the split, just
Right.
to see where
Okay.
the income is coming in from, because it's really a flag in the database, right? It's
Right.
like,
Right.
you're saying if it's soap, you mark it with S. If it's web, if it's from the website, you mark it with W. If it's from a calling, you mark it with C. Some kind of flag, something to indicate that, this revenue came in this way. You know what I'm saying? Right now, they're not doing that, and which I don't understand why, but that's basically what I'm asking. Does other company do that? You've worked a few places. Do it really matter how the income is coming in? Should we really care? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. I get the details of the question now. So thanks for the additional background. It can certainly matter, and I have worked with companies where it was very important to understand the sources of income for lots of different reasons, right? Because having a company having that type of visibility can help them to see how they can grow those sources of income. The other reason where I saw that the other reasons why I saw that type of detail being applied to revenues and income is to match it back to expenses, so you get the real benefit that you might be getting from a particular feature. So and there are other reasons similar to that. But I would the first thing I would ask, the question is whether a company should do that. And I'm going to go back to my quick answer, Reynard. Again, maybe, and let me explain what I mean behind that. Let's say a company's revenues today are X, and from technology, the technology part of that X that might come from providing software services or APIs, or perhaps data feeds, whatever the technology pieces might be. Let's say the technology pieces of that are 80%, right? The large majority of that revenue, right, for technology of X is a big part of it. And in that case, I would think that a company might want to understand in more detail what the components of the revenue streams are from technology, because technology is a big part of it, right? But then let's flip that example around. Let's say the technology pieces, that may be considered, let's say it's not a big component. Let's say it's 20% or maybe 15 or 10%. Well, a company might decide that in that case, it's better to put their efforts into understanding where the bigger components of the revenue stream are, right? And they might put efforts in different areas. That's not to say that a company won't get benefit, even if the technology pieces are a smaller part of their revenue streams. It's not to say that a company won't get benefit in understanding those smaller pieces. I think in most cases they absolutely will. And maybe it just gets back to what we were talking about before with prioritizing IT work. Maybe it's just not the time right now to deep dive into those details for smaller revenue streams. Maybe it's right a year from now, 3 years from now, right? And they'll mature to get to that level of understanding.
Got you.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that this is a challenges, issue, problem part of the questionnaire that I'm doing. I think it's very obvious the way we're discussing the questions. My third question is the carrier quote API. So we typically get pricing from a specific our internal machine that we get pricing, which is well aged. Now we're getting pricing from other carriers like ODFL, STs, SIA, UPS. Those big companies have API quote system that we can tap. The problem is our order entry doesn't typically support some of those features. However, the company wants to give the customer some of those features on the web. Is there any way to do that technology-wise? Should we even should our director of IT even entertain that? Or should we force the company to say, listen, we have to match whatever you're giving the customers in our order entry 100%? Or can we partially implement, give the customer everything the API or majority of the thing that the API has, and only bring it, only key kind of support certain things in our order entry in-house? Is have you ever gone through something like that, Sal?
Yeah, I mean, what I think you're describing, what I hear you're describing, Reynard, is about digitizing, digitizing your business and helping your customers to digitize their business, right? So whenever we can whenever we can improve our software and improve the way we manage data on behalf of our customers through features in our applications or streamlining of the processes that we use to do business with our customers, whenever we can improve those things, there's going to be lots of benefits, and in many cases those benefits are hard to measure. So for example, by providing that type of automation to your customers, it's gonna help them to make decisions quicker. It's gonna help them to get to do cost analysis for shipping their goods in much more robust ways. It's gonna help them with the end-to-end processing of the orders that they submit to you and the tracking of those things, right? because we've used capabilities to digitize the way those business processes work. So it sounds to me like, so as just a retail consumer of different services, I might go onto a website to order something, and as you just described, there might be a pull down there that I could choose. Do you want to use FedEx? Do you want to use UPS or some other carrier? And I can toggle between them, and different services present the cost in different ways, some better than others. But as an end user of those type of services on a retail basis, they are very, very useful, right? And doing business with companies that use those type of or that have those type of capabilities in their systems, in their ordering systems, influences me to do more business with them compared to competitors, right? So I would think that type of feature and capability would be very important on a competitive basis. And I would also think that most customers would appreciate having those type of capabilities in the ordering systems that they're using to do business with your company.
So basically, you're definitely agreeing that we should just adapt all the features the API supports in our order entry system. Just match it one-to-one to what we're presenting to the customer. Is that what you're saying? That right?
Well, Reynard, if you're asking me to write you a check, I think I would write you a check for those features, right? However, if it was my order entry system, right?
Yeah,
and we were working to make some feature improvements on it, I think I would be inclined to write that check. However, right? This is the maybe and but part of my response. What's really the bigger picture? Is it right to add those features now, right? What will we be foregoing, right? Opportunity costs need to be considered when we look at the bigger picture of what else is on the company's plate. The other thing even though continuing, if we're a company providing services, particularly those services around applications and software, even though digitizing those capabilities are a very important thing to think of and do, right? To continue to move our business forward in that way, right? And more of adding more and more digital capabilities. Even though that is a very important influence, I think we also have to understand what's the alternative not having it, right? So if those APIs aren't built into the order entry system, as this example we're talking about is, if it isn't built into that system, what's the alternative? How are the customers going to get the quotes? How are they going to get an estimate for their shipping costs? And then how is that going to be tracked? So when we understand what the alternatives might be, and maybe the alternatives are very clear that they're not beneficial to us or our customers. Maybe the alternatives is to do that manually, and it's leaving it up to the customer to make decisions. And when a customer has to make decisions, we don't know what else they're going to look at. They might start looking at our competitors, right? Mm-hmm. So when we look at the alternatives, it may be very clear to us, let's write the check, right? Let's write the check and get those APIs plugged in. But I think we have a responsibility to consider the alternatives. Sometimes there are scenarios that we just can't imagine. You know, we have to take a moment, step back, see the forest through the trees. Sometimes we could come up with very innovative things if we put a little bit more brain power and thought into it. You know, we're doing something that we think is right and obvious actually isn't. So even though on the surface, I think my knee-jerk reaction would be to write that check, I do want to caveat it by saying, let's make sure we're looking at the bigger picture and looking at opportunity costs and making sure we are making the right decision, because software changes like that can be very expensive, not only to implement, but also maintain on an ongoing basis.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that answer, Sal. Thank you. My
good scenario.
Is unable to get respect from your colleague. Should you move on from the company or should you stay? You know, we spoke about this little last semester, and you gave some great answer. So I just want you to touch on that, you know, the things that you can do to kind of mend the bridge, or, you know, just all scenarios when it comes to that, because, you know, there's always a bad egg, you know, for some odd reason, you know, even in a great company, you know what I'm saying? So just touch on that, how to handle these kind of things in IT.
Yeah, so I do remember earlier this year, I think it was, we had a session about conflict in the workplace. Is that what you're remembering back to?
That's what I'm remembering. That's
yeah,
the front of my brain there, you know. That's what I'm
yeah. It's something that's common. It's something that I think we all experience. It happens, you know. It gets down to the culture of the company and how it's handled and addressed. You know, it gets down to you know, the relationship we have with our managers and our teammates and our colleagues, and lots of things like that. You know, and you know, like we talked about in the past, I think I should also mention it here now too, is that you know, conflict in the workplace, you know, can be, I think, classified into you know, unhealthy conflict, but also productive conflict, right? So I think we have to acknowledge that too, and maybe I can comment on that.
You can touch a little bit on both. You can touch a little bit on both.
Yeah. So you know, the most common thing I think happens is we're working with someone, we don't see eye to eye, we have different perspectives on how something should be done, and what typically happens, and how we first observe that the conflict is unhealthy or something is going wrong, is a breakdown in communications, right? We're just not communicating with each other in productive ways. Sometimes that communication starts to borderline on being unprofessional. That's when that happens, it's a sign that there's a bigger problem that's festering. Sometimes communication thins out and stops, right? We stop hearing from a colleague. We stop interacting with them, and that's another indication that there's a big problem that happened. Those are some of the observations that I think we make. There's lots of different ways to handle it, right? Most of the ways involve being proactive to address it once we make those observations that something isn't right. And by the way, sometimes an observation starts with a feeling, right? Sometimes we develop a nervous feeling unnecessarily when working with someone, right? Sometimes we have a feeling that we're being put off by someone, right? They're not hearing us, or they're not giving us the right, they're not interacting with us in the right way. And that comes across as a feeling to us. So that's an important dimension to the situation that we should acknowledge and we should be aware of, right? We shouldn't discount our feelings when these things come up, because in many cases they tell us something about what's going on. So it's an important input to understanding what's going on. So I said a moment ago, usually the best way to address it is head on, and it depends on the circumstance how we might do that. If we have a productive relationship with our managers, that could be a good start, right? Going to our managers and saying, hey, you and I and this other person were in a meeting together. Was it me, or was I getting a vibe that this person really didn't want to work with me, or wasn't communicating with me properly, right? Or was discounting everything that I said. I was getting a cold shoulder, right? And sometimes we can initiate those discussions with our manager, and that is a good start in many cases, because our manager can be a sounding board for us, right? We can get some feedback. We can cross-check observations. Sometimes we're making a mountain out of a molehill, right? Sometimes a manager may come back and say, no, don't worry about it. That's just the way the person communicates. And then we could maybe start to feel a little bit more comfortable about it. But then sometimes a manager may say, hey, I noticed that too, right? And it'll give you a forum to start talking about the conflict, the nature of it, get some feedback on what someone else is seeing, and helping us to formulate ideas and approaches to address it. Ultimately, it's always good to be able to talk to the person we're having conflict with and address it head on. But once we have an understanding of what the conflict may be, right? So that's why using a manager is helpful, or maybe another colleague that we have trust with, right? We have professional trust with. But going over to someone and saying, and starting a discussion, maybe softly, by saying something like, hey, I don't think we're eye to eye on this topic or this matter, or the way to do this, the way to do something or accomplish a goal. I was wondering if you feel that way too. So ask an open-ended question, get the cards on the table, about what the differences might be, and see if you can open up a discussion about it. When we could be, as individuals, when we could be proactive in addressing the conflict in that way and communicating with someone in a new way, 9 out of 10 times, the large majority of times in my experience, it moves the relationship with that person in a direction of being much more productive in the future, right? A lot of times addressing conflict and overcoming conflict with another individual leaves those two people with a much better relationship than they had before. The foundations of that relationship are better. And the benefit of the benefit of that improved relationship and that more open communication between those two individuals has much broader benefit to the organization, starting with the team, right? Because improving communication in a team sometimes starts with just two people improving the way they communicate, and then it spreads, right? And then teams are part of groups, and groups are part of departments, and it could have much greater benefit if two individuals just take it upon themselves to work out the conflict. There's more to say. There's more to say about how to address it. But let me spend a little bit of time talking about productive conflict, because I think that's often overlooked and sometimes missed opportunity, right? So in a professional environment, I think we have a responsibility to speak up, right, about the way we see things, about better ways of doing things, right, about the way we're feeling about something. I think we have a professional responsibility to do that. That professional responsibility is based on our experience, and we might have decades of experience to share. And if we don't speak up, we're not sharing that experience, right? We have viewpoints that are influenced by what we've experienced in our lives outside of work, right? Maybe, we've had to overcome some ethical issues in the past, or we've had to overcome some other hardships in our lives, and that is experience tied together with our work experience that can bring greater benefit to what we're doing at work, right? So I think for those reasons, we have a responsibility to speak up. Now, when we're asked to do something at work, and let's say we just have a different viewpoint on how something should be done, or how we're looking at a problem, solving something, or coming up with a solution, sometimes when we speak up about it, a conflict is going to develop, because there's other people, in that team, in that department, whoever they are that we're interacting with, that have different life experiences and different work experience and different perspectives. And they have a responsibility to speak up. And by both of us speaking up, a conflict may develop because those things are different, right? But when we speak up, we share our experiences, we patiently take the time to explain our viewpoints. We're objective about that, right? And by being objective in that scenario, what I really mean is that we are sharing our experiences, perfectly willing and understanding that our perspectives may change, right? The way we see something that we're speaking up about, we're going into that discussion of it with complete openness that our perspectives may change. So we are going to become good listeners, right? And I think we have an expectation that the other side is going to do that too. The other side is going to be good listeners, right? And will also be objective in a similar way, although they may not be. So we have to be aware of that, right? But when we speak up, and assuming we can have productive discussions, right? Sharing our experiences, and both sides are going back and forth, and both sides are open to change the perspective and how they're seeing something. The conflict of working through that, right? Taking the time, sharing how we see things, being patient in explaining things, having a debate, right, around something, and putting time into that. It may feel like conflict, right? As we're going through that whole process, we're debating, we're sharing, we're taking time. As we're going through that whole process, it may feel like conflict, but if it's done objectively with the right intentions and with open-mindedness, it can bring the whole organization to a different place, a much better place than sometimes either party anticipated.
I think this was excellent for those people leaving remote work, coming out of COVID, and coming back on site. I mean, that's basically what you just described, which is excellent. Thank you, Sal.
Yeah.
My fifth question is, we have a vendor that we use to purchase servers, right? And this vendor is giving us just every excuse you can think of. And it kind of delays everything, not putting in this new server. Should we look for another vendor when it comes to purchasing a server? Should we allow this vendor to delay the process of the company advancing in every way, any way you can think of? Because sometimes a server is a lifesaver. Sometimes you're preventing downtime with replacing these servers. So that's my question to you. How would you handle that?
Yeah. Vendor management is a discipline in IT. It's something that we all have to get good at being IT managers. In smaller size companies, vendor management, we might not even call it that. We rely on a lot of vendors to get our work done in smaller companies. And sometimes we just work with them.
What does bigger company do? Because I don't know. I have no clue. So expound on that.
Yeah. So a larger size company will have a vendor management group, right? So vendor management is a discipline in IT, and the scope of it as a discipline depends on the size of the company, right? So in bigger companies, you'll have a whole group or a department that's focused on vendor management because outside vendors provide so many services in lots of cases, right? So look, sometimes it could be kind of a quick thing, right? Maybe the vendor let you down 2 or 3 times, and maybe you got to do your own risk management on what's happening there, because they're setting back your projects, right? And they're delaying delivery on your own priorities. That could be very impactful to a company, and there's a risk management component of it. Sometimes the vendor may not be right? Maybe selling selling servers was something that they did very well 5 years ago because people were buying lots of servers. But now there's so many servers that are implemented in the cloud. Maybe this vendor has switched to selling laptops, right? And they only sell, a server now and again, and they're just not set up to do it anymore. So I think having a discussion about what happened, why it happened, understanding those details is important, right? Because maybe when you talk to the vendor about it, the vendor just might come out and say, in this example, hey, servers isn't something we do well anymore, right? Because we sell more desktops or laptops. It could be very quick to work it out. In that scenario, as an example, the vendor might even be appreciative that you brought it up, right? Because they might have been trying to help you and they realized they were doing a bad job, and they're thankful that they talked to you about it. And that you brought it up, and that they could just get their cards on the table. We don't do that well anymore. But what the other thing I would like to highlight that sometimes I think companies miss, and what larger companies that have vendor management groups spend a lot of time doing, is making sure that their vendors and suppliers understand the objectives of the company very, very clearly, right? So a vendor management group, there will be a two-way sharing of information between the vendor management group representing the company's suppliers. That's usually done on a year-over-year basis, because company priorities are usually, goals and objectives are usually set, within a calendar year. So sometimes, it's done more often than that, right? Sometimes quarterly, or sometimes twice yearly, whatever it might be. But there's a two-way sharing of objectives, and including the vendors, where they will make the company aware, hey, we just became a new Microsoft partner, or we just started a partnership with Oracle, and we're delivering, we're helping our customers implement systems on their cloud. So there's a two-way sharing of that information. sometimes I think companies miss being clear about their objectives with a vendor because we think about them as someone outside of our company, right? I think it's better. Now, I'm going to use this example, but I don't mean, I'm not recommending to take it at face value. Sometimes we have to think about working with a vendor like they were an employee, right? Or another member of our team. So if we hire someone new into our team, you know, we're going to spend the first couple of weeks getting that new employee up to speed on what we do, right? Hey, this is our objectives. Here's our priorities right now. Here's our projects. These are the deadlines. This is what we're all focused on. And we work one-on-one with that new individual to make sure they are set up as best they can to start contributing to the most important objectives of the company, the department, the team, or whatever it might be. A lot of times we don't spend that time with our vendors, right? We don't communicate to them what objectives we have, where we're expecting them to deliver on. And we're clear about that so that they understand what they need to do to be successful. With most vendors, in my experience, I would put it in the 9 out of 10 category again. When we take the time to communicate the objectives and our expectations of the vendor, hey, when we put in the server order, it's really, really important that we know when we're going to get it in, right? So when that order goes in, ideally, same day, we want to know what the ETA is. You know, and when you give us an ETA, it can't be off more than a day or two, right? It can't be a week late because that's going to set our projects back. Sometimes just communicating that with a vendor helps them to change the way that they work with us on their side, so we have a much better relationship with them. So be mindful, be mindful of spending time with vendors out and other suppliers and contractors that may be outside the company, making sure that they're clear on the objectives that we're expecting them to deliver on.
So suppose we done all that, we did all that, and we still can't deliver, then what? We have done everything that you have suggested, and there's issues delivering. What do we do?
Well, in that case, that it happens too. You gotta transition out of that vendor, right? By the way, you know, when we usually set up a team or a department, there's always you know, the sports analogy there is bench strength, right? You know, we always have people on our team that can back each other up. You know, and you know, if someone's time is redirected to a priority, or maybe someone may be unexpectedly out of the office for some reason, we always think about the bench strength that we have in our team, and we could back each other up, and we could use the flexibility in the team, right, to shift work in different ways. I think there's bench strength in vendors too, right? So don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you're buying servers, you probably want to be buying servers from 2 or more vendors. You probably want to distribute that ordering around. By doing that, you're making observations of which vendors are better to work with, which are more responsive, which are being competitive, right, with market pricing, and which vendors may be managing their business with you in modern ways, right? Being digital, giving you you know, software controls and data feeds and reporting that's productive for the business you're doing with them. So having some bench strength in your vendors, right, so you can shift business around, is also important. So that when you start observing that one vendor isn't delivering for you, it's easy to shift the responsibilities to some other vendor.
So we are on our second set of questions. Thank you for the answer for the first set, opportunity, resolution, and success story. My first question is, I have created an API to accept orders from customers through the web and their system using our API, which increased revenue. So, which means that the customer can push through orders automatically, either through SOAP or on the web, which have increased revenue. Have you done anything like that, success stories wise?
So success stories of growing a business with technology and helping customers.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think lots of examples that way, Renard. I could choose from a mountain of examples. Let me talk about the first one that came to mind. Right. I'll just talk about the first one that came to mind. There's other examples, but I think this one is a good one, and it's representative. Because you mentioned APIs, right, which is improving software and automation. So it was several years back, about 10 or 12 years ago now. I was working at a startup company that was developing software for hedge funds, right? It was providing portfolio accounting services to hedge funds, trade order management, portfolio management, holdings, reporting, and so on. So it was a fund administrator for hedge funds, and the technology that we implemented there was based on a vendor system. And then around that vendor system, there was all this proprietary and custom software that we wrote to make the vendor system much more useful to our hedge fund clients, right? And we had a model of delivering this combined solution, our hedge fund in a box solution, to a number of hedge funds, right? Lots of different hedge funds were using it. And as we would normally do, as we would normally expect, our customers are using our system and they're giving us feedback. Hey, I would like to have this report. I would like to have this automated. Can you put a button on here? Can you make it easier for me to set up a new user? Whatever it may be, we were getting feedback and feature requests, right, which are typical. And we were developing those feature requests, putting them through the normal development cycle of development, quality assurance, and then deployment and production. But the challenge that we had was getting the software in production to all our hedge fund clients, right? Because we were going in manually, right, and doing each upgrade. It got to the point where an upgrade might have taken 60 or 90 minutes, but a lot of upgrades we had to implement on the weekend during off hours, and it got to the point where we didn't have enough hours in the weekend to be able to do that, right? So we had to put some time into automating our release processes, right? They were manual procedures that were very rigorous, step by step, to make sure that the changes were implemented as they should and there were no errors. So we had those steps. We were very clear to us, but we needed to make investment in automating that. And where we started was in development. We decided that any change coming out of development was going to be automatically deployed to the quality assurance environment, right? And that's where we started. And it got to the point where iterating over those improvements between dev and QA, between the quality assurance environment, it got to the point that our development was happening quicker, right? Because we were getting feedback from quality assurance much quicker. And then once we had the automation in place, right, to take changes from development and put them in QA in the matter of a minute, right, for something to be deployed, we just we just had the confidence, and we developed a strong capability to then deploy those changes in the same way to our customers, right? Where before we had a team of people changing customer environments throughout a weekend. We would start these deployments after business hours on a Friday, and they would be done before we went home on Friday night, right? All through that type of automation. Our customers were able to log in over the weekend if they wanted and checked out the new features before the start of business on Monday, where before that they were going in Monday and finding problems, which was setting them back and causing a lot of issues for us support-wise. But that investment and improvement had so many benefits to our customers, more stable operations. We were able to deploy more features to them quicker. We started doing midweek deployments because our automation got so good and reliable. So a customer might ask us for a feature on Monday, let's say a very straightforward change to a report. We were able to deploy that to them Wednesday morning, right? Because the automation got so good. And being able to increase our responsiveness to customers and the new features that they needed, and ended up developing much better relationship with those customers and getting us more customers, right? Because we were able to do things quicker than our competitors.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you. I have also created a link between transportation carriers to our logistics company using SOAP JSON to get unlimited free codes for all shipments. I don't quite understand this question, but have you done anything like that? Have you done any working within any new technology like JSON and stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure.
Can you expound on that, Sal?
Yeah, so is the question about incorporating new technologies, or?
Yeah, incorporating the technology. I think the question is really gearing to giving customers the ability to, to do things unlimited. Don't put like a cap on them. I realize that, everything is not free anymore. They want to charge for everything. And I know you recently came out with that doesn't charge anybody, that they can retrieve this information, right? If there's an issue, without any cost, So I just want you to expound on that. Your app.
On my app?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because I don't think you charge for that, right?
I don't. Yeah, I don't charge for it.
And I pretty much do the same thing in a different type of way. With some customers, they can get as much quote as they want. They can do anything. Not everything we need to charge for in technology. Certain things can be for free, right?
Yeah.
I think you contributed to that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for giving me time to talk about my app and for asking about it. I mean, would it be helpful to? I know what my app does. You helped test it, Reynard. Very, very appreciative of that. You've always put the time into it and sent me excellent feedback. Is it worthwhile? And so I know what my app does. Is it worthwhile to talk about it here, or should I just talk about why I decided not to charge for it?
Touch on everything.
Okay. All right. Well, I developed an app. It's published on the Apple iStore. It's called Mettle CVE. Mettle METTLE CVE. CVE stands for Common Vulnerability and Exposure, and Common Vulnerability and Exposure is an ID that's assigned by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. National Institute of Standards and Technologies to every vulnerability that's identified in the industry. And what my app does is it allows people who can quickly remediate vulnerabilities. So that's like systems administrators, database administrators, developers, system engineers, and so on. It allows the people who remediate vulnerabilities to look up the details of a vulnerability and get the information that they need to fix it quickly. That information is often the patches, the vendor advisories, and other information like that. So my app focuses on surfacing the remediation information that people need to fix vulnerabilities quicker. It's an iPhone app, and I've tried to make it as easy as possible for someone to enter in a CVE ID and just present the patch information as quickly as possible, so that they could zoom into it and not have all the other dozens and sometimes over 100 details associated with the vulnerability kind of take away their focus. You know, when I thought about developing this app because I had a responsibility at a company I worked for, a large global enterprise. I had a responsibility for a period of time in managing the vulnerability management and security remediation team. So I was responsible for getting vulnerabilities fixed for this company globally for a period of time. That was my job. And I always wished it would be easier for people to get patch information. It was just in their face at the click of a button. That was the motivation for writing the app, right? The functionality of the app. I also had some personal reasons for doing it. You know, I mentioned at the beginning, I've been doing IT for a while. I've had various roles. I love software. I love being hands-on with software today. You know, developing applications and writing software. I never really wrote an app for a mobile environment, right? So I started my IT career doing software development on mainframes. I worked on mini computers. I've done desktop software. I've done workstation-based software for financial institutions, server-side software on Windows and on Linux and Unix platforms, OpenVMS, which is a mini computer server-side platform in the 80s and 90s. But I never really developed anything for mobile, and I wanted to understand that. So I was kind of lucky to have some time available to dive into the development environment on the Mac. By the way, I never really developed software for the Mac either, even though I've done some prior development on the Next platform, right? Next was the platform that Next was the company that Steve Jobs founded after he first left Apple, and then Next was purchased by Apple in the late 90s, and the Next development environment ended up carrying over to Mac OS. So although I was familiar with Next, and I did development on Next, I never really did it on the Mac platform, and I never really did development on mobile. And I wanted to understand that a little bit better. It's something that I just wanted to do. So I had some personal objectives for myself to do mobile development, and I put the app together. It reads off of the National Vulnerability Database. There's a JSON API that the National Institute of Standards and Technologies makes available. It's open and free to everyone to use, and that's the way the app got developed, and it was approved on the App Store. I did need to make a decision on whether or not to charge for it, and I did think about that, right? I thought that my time had some value, and there would be some value to the app, and that maybe charging something, like 99 cents, would be reasonable, but maybe it's a specialized app. I could even get more for that. Maybe I should be charging $5.99 or $9.99 or something. So I did put some thought into it, but ultimately what I decided was to release it for free. It's still available for free. If anyone listens to this and is interested in downloading it and checking it out, that would certainly be great. It's still available for free, and my motivations for making the decision to keep it free, at least for now, is so that I can continue to get more feedback on the features that people would find useful, right? So I have a roadmap for the app. These are features I imagine by keeping the app free for now, there is something that I'm hoping to get back. And that's having more people use it because it's free. It's easier to make a decision to use it. And then hoping that because of that, people will give me more feedback that will ultimately make the app better in some way. So in the future, there might be features that I can charge for.
Excellent, excellent. My other question is, does your success stories from previous job make it easier to lead, you know, or be a director in the new job that you would land yourself into, or another job? Does it become easier, or it's just the same? It's just the same, you know, rigorous. What should I say? You know,
The same mundane.
Yes.
The same mundane thing.
Does your because you definitely going to gain experience, right? So, you know, does that experience make it easier when you go to the next level? You know, this is something that I'm curious about.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very straightforward answer to that, and that's yes, yes, and yes. You know, your experience in many cases when you're interviewing with a new company is what's being measured. You know, along with your experience is that the perspective and the judgment that's developed, I think that's being measured too. So your experience matters, right? Having experience of doing things that didn't work out and doing other things that did work out. Both of those go together, and they're very important for new companies hiring you. So experience is extremely important. I think experience also develops in us individually confidence, right? Confidence in the approaches that we believe in, also confidence in the approaches that didn't work out for us and we may not believe in, right? So we carry both forward. So that confidence also helps in our future and in growing, right? Approaching something with confidence also, you know, certainly helps us to get our arms around it and tackle it and want to do it, right? With the right level of energy. All of that is benefit that experience brings to us. But I'll tell you something else, Reynard. I've come to look at my experience as kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because I think what initially motivated your question about you know, perhaps work and the approach we use becoming just rigorous, repetitive things that we do, and maybe to the point of being mundane. I know that's the word I used, but I sense that that's maybe where you were going with the question. Experience can sometimes, we have to be careful of this. Experience can sometimes be experience can sometimes put up borders on the way we think about things, right? Our experience can put up thick walls in how we think about things. So we have to be aware of that. And that's what I mean by a double-edged sword. Absolutely, we rely on experience for so many different things. We should continue to develop that as we grow in our careers. But we have to constantly be good listeners, being open-minded to other perspectives. We have to be voracious readers, and in doing all those things, we have to think about ways of exposing ourselves to information and viewpoints that may be different than the way we're thinking about things now, and maybe be significantly different than the way we've done things in our past, and that our experience influences us to think about things, right? So I would like to point out both things, right? Experience, absolutely very, very, very valuable. It's what we It's what we talk about when we look to grow in our careers and get a bigger job, right? More responsibility, or do things that are challenging to us in a new way, but also keep in mind that, experience could put boundaries on the way we think about things and may prevent us from doing things in better ways.
Thank you for that answer, Sal. I think we kind of touched on this, but this is going a little bit more in depth. Lead your team through changes. We talk about moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11. I think we start from the top and what the company, but what if they okay it and you have to lead your team through those changes? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah. I can describe my career in lots of different ways, right? I could say I started in academics and I worked in financial services. I was an engineer and I was a senior manager. I could describe my career in lots of, I worked at enterprises. I worked in startups. I can describe my career in lots of different ways. What's kind of has been consistent throughout my career is developing skill sets to lead change, right? To work through change. Earlier on in my career, working through change was a very individual thing. I needed to do a similar upgrade, right? I needed to go from Microsoft DOS to Microsoft Windows, let's say back at the very beginning of my career. But as you take on more responsibilities, and particularly in cases where you're responsible for people, being able to lead people through change is increasingly important, and it's a skill set that we have to develop as IT managers, right? That's a skill set. It's very important for us to develop individually because we have a responsibility for the people that we lead to help them through change. So I could also look back at my career and say, I have learned something about change at various levels, right? Particularly when working with a team, I think it's very, very important that as a leader, we are very clear on our objectives that are influencing the upcoming change, right? A lot of times change can be upsetting to people, right? Change represents the unknown, and people kind of, get instinctually cautious about the unknown, right? For lots of good reasons. So we have to be aware that people may have that reaction, right? There's upcoming change and they may pull back from it because it's the unknown. So the best way of addressing that is just be very, very clear on our objectives. Why are we doing it? Where will we be in the future? How is it going to benefit us? How will the future be better, right, for us? How will the future be different? When we're able to describe the end game and the reasons for it, people start to come to terms with the change. And more importantly, so their fear associated with the change starts to break down, starts to dissipate. And more importantly, when people get comfortable with the upcoming change and they're clear about it, they can start to contribute to the change in the best ways that they know how to, right? And in a lot of cases, that gets us through the change to much better outcomes, right? We're able to move through it quicker. We're able to identify outcomes that we didn't see before. We're able to have more fun going through the change, right? Because we're doing it together and it's challenging us, and we're growing in our skills in a certain way. So I think leading through change is a very important skill to develop. Being clear on the objectives is very important for us to constantly improve our communications as an IT manager and a leader, and feeling that responsibility to the people that we're leading in circumstances of change, and realizing we have to help them through it is very important too. I would like to mention, in the event you or anyone else wants to look it up, there's a model, and this is a little bit formal. I've sometimes used it, but it has influenced me since I first came across it. There's a model for change called the Lippitt-Noster change model, right? Lippit, Noster, Knoster. If you Google that, the Lippitt-Noster change model, you'll come across it. And what I like about the way that they present change is that they talk about the various components that are necessary for change to happen successfully, right? So we got to, you know, some of those things, some of the components I mentioned, right? We have to be clear on why we're doing it. We have to be clear about the direction we're going in. We have to be clear about the benefits. Those are like the components that go into why we're doing change. And the Lippitt-Noster model lays those out in the matrix. And what it does well, I think, is it shows what you get if any one of those components is missing, right? So if for example, let's say you're not clear on your objectives for the change, then what that's going to develop is confusion. So if you're not clear on your reason as a component, then what develops is confusion. So if you're in a situation where people might be confused, I think this model helps. In this example, it helps to identify what is causing that confusion and how to overcome it. So I would also recommend for people to be aware of that model, taking a look at it. It helps to put some formalization around the way change is conducted, and also make us more aware of the components of change that we constantly have to work through.
Excellent answer. So my last answer is inspired and motivate others. I mean, you know, I understand how I started out this interview, but I wanted to touch on that. You know, that's something even I have problems challenging. And, you know, I think that's just a great opportunity to inspire and motivate others, especially on your team. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's easier for me to talk about motivating others than maybe inspiring others. I can certainly talk about what inspires me, and maybe that's how I'll respond. And look, in working with people and interacting with people, I certainly hope that I am inspiring, right? But it's hard for me to measure that, and it's also hard for me to think about you know, being inspiring as an objective. But I could tell you what inspires me, and hopefully some of that will rub off in some way to others. But you know, motivating people, I think, you know, I probably told you this before, Reynard. When I was in high school, I played football. That team environment was very influential to me, right? Getting together with my teammates, practicing together, getting our strength up, right? We're working together in the gym, getting our skills up. We're on the field, so you know, every day during the season, every day late at night and dark on the weekends, practicing together, committing to it. All, you know, to play a game and hopefully win. That whole experience was very influential to me. You know, I think it influenced me in ways that I can't even measure today. But when I go to work, it kind of feels like that, right? When I'm going to work, I'm working with a team, and a lot of times what we're doing today we've never done before. We're doing new things, right? So we have to grow together. We have to develop new skills, right? In the same way that I was scrimmaging with my teammates to develop new skills on how we executed a play, right? A play in our football team. When we're at work, we have to learn new technologies. We have to learn new programming languages. We have to learn new ways of making changes, right? So the outcomes are ever free or whatever it might be. And that experience, I'm working with a team, I think motivation starts there, right? So people coming to work don't feel like they're alone. They feel like they're part of a team. When you're part of a team that has clear objectives that are shared across many individuals in the group, people feel like they have a bigger purpose, right? And particularly in cases where we are working together, we're giving each other feedback, productive feedback, we're helping each other grow in our skills. I think that's one of the primary reasons that people come to work. So as a manager of people, my first responsibility for trying to motivate people is to helping to foster that team environment, right? Helping to influence all of that I just said, right? The working together, we rely on each other, we're sharing our knowledge, we're giving feedback, we're growing together, we're all heading in a similar direction to achieve something that none of us has done before. So my first responsibility to the people that I get to manage is to foster that team for all of that. And I think motivation is a byproduct, right, of a healthy team that works extremely productively together, right? That's the motivation, I think, comes as a byproduct of that. In terms of being inspired, I was watching a Lex Friedman podcast early this morning over coffee. There was a guy on it who initially I thought was a semiconductor scientist, right? He was talking a lot about chips and semiconductor materials, silicone and superconductivity, but his knowledge, starting with hardware, right? Like a chip designer, his knowledge extended into neuroscience, right? Because he was developing approaches to do, kind of computer thinking or something like that. And then the conversation just took a completely unexpected turn to me. He started talking about astrophysics, right? And he knew so much about the low-level details of how atoms and electrons are influenced by the laws of quantum mechanics to create superconductivity through the way our brains think and the network that our brains have with billions and billions, tens of billions of neurons, through the operation of galaxies and the way the universe develops. I found his breadth of knowledge so inspiring. I was so impressed. And the other thing that he really impressed me about was how he explained these very, very complicated topics in a way that I got my arms around them, right? There were points he was asked a question by Lex Friedman, and there were points where he said, I'm not going to talk about the technical details, but this is how it works. And it was inspiring to me how he explained something so that I could understand it, and then be inspired by what he was saying, right? That inspired me, how he explained it. Such a good communicator. And it was clear to me he was a very passionate person about his field, the work he was doing, and he was a very optimistic person. And particularly when he started talking about the universe, so the bigger picture, astrophysics and so on, he was very optimistic about, what we're doing here and, his work and him being part of it and so on. Extremely optimistic. And that was inspiring to me, right? His passion and his optimism were inspiring to me. Those are the things that inspire me. I would hope that the things that inspire me somehow influence others, right? Somehow the things that inspire me helps other people to find inspiration in their work. I hope that being part of a team, having responsibilities for managing a team, interacting with people, right? I hope that I can bring that, right? I hope that I could bring the qualities that may help other people to find inspiration, whatever they're doing, based on those things that inspire me.
Salvatore, thank you for being on Name This Podcast Later. Thank you so much. I think it was fun. I think it was great. I think you know, I think we did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Renard.